The Black Cowboy rides on moonless nights in the Texas Panhandle, and they say you can still hear the thunder of his hoofbeats where no horse should run. The sound rolls across the empty prairie like distant drums, growing louder until it seems the very earth must split open. Then, just when you think whatever's coming will run you down, the sound stops. Complete silence, and if you're fool enough to look behind you, you might catch a glimpse of something that shouldn't be there. A rider dressed all in black on a horse the color of midnight, watching you from atop some distant ridge. The locals will tell you his legend if you buy them enough whiskey to loosen their tongues. But they'll also tell you this: some stories are better left untold, because once you know about him, he knows about you. Bitter Creek, Texas had seen its share of hard men in 1877. The frontier was still wild enough that a man's past stayed buried if he wanted it that way. Cattle drives passed through regularly, bringing dusty cowboys with money to spend and tempers to match. Gunfighters and gamblers worked the saloons. Rustlers and outlaws used the surrounding canyons as hideouts. Nothing much surprised anyone in Bitter Creek anymore. That changed on September 14th when the stranger rode in at dawn. He emerged from the prairie mist like something conjured from smoke, sitting astride a massive black stallion that moved with eerie, fluid grace. He was dressed entirely in black: black hat, black coat, black vest, black trousers, even black gloves. The only color was the silver of his spurs and the bone-white handles of twin Colt peacemakers holstered at his hips. But it was his face that made people stare. He was a colored man, his skin dark as polished mahogany with features carved from stone. His eyes were the most unsettling part, not their color, which was a deep, penetrating brown, but what they held. They were old eyes, ancient eyes, eyes that had seen things no man should see, and remembered things best forgotten. Marshal Cyrus Blackwell watched from his office window as the stranger rode down Main Street. Blackwell was a fair man who judged people by their actions rather than their color. But something about this rider made the hair on his neck stand up. The stranger dismounted in front of the Dusty Rose Saloon, tied his horse with slow, deliberate movements, and walked through the batwing doors. His spurs didn't jingle like normal spurs. They made a sound like wind chimes in a graveyard, soft, melodic, and deeply wrong. Inside the Dusty Rose, the morning crowd went silent. 20 men stopped mid-drink to stare at the figure in black. In 1877 Texas, a colored man walking into a white saloon was asking for trouble. The stranger walked to the bar, his boots making no sound despite his spurs. The bartender, Seamus O'Malley, told him they didn't serve his kind. The stranger said he wasn't there for a drink. From a corner table, Jed Holloway spoke up. Holloway was a known rustler who rode with the vicious Taggart gang, and his two companions, brothers named Clem and Billy Sutton, snickered as their leader challenged the stranger. The stranger turned slowly and told them he was there for Jed Holloway and his friends, and for every man in the territory who thought he could steal, murder, and terrorize without paying the price. Nervous laughter filled the saloon. Holloway stood, his hand near his gun, asking if the stranger was some kind of lawman. The stranger said he carried no badge and answered to no law except the oldest law, the law that says every debt comes due, the law that says blood calls for blood. Holloway called him crazy. The Sutton brothers stood, spreading out to flank their leader. All three were armed with reputations as dangerous gunfighters. Then the stranger smiled. It was the most terrifying smile anyone there had ever seen. No warmth, no humor, no humanity. Just something ancient and patient that had waited a long time for this moment. He told them to draw. 3 men went for their guns. The stranger's hands moved. Some said they blurred, others swore they vanished. His twin Colts appeared like magic. 6 shots rang out, So close together they sounded like a drum roll. Jed Holloway took 2 bullets through the heart. Clem Sutton caught 1 in the forehead and 1 in the throat. Billy Sutton was hit twice in the chest. All 3 were dead before they hit the floor. The stranger holstered his weapons and asked if anyone else wanted to settle accounts. No one moved. Then he walked out, mounted his black horse, and rode south. Marshal Blackwell arrived just in time to see him disappear into the heat haze. Blackwell examined the bodies with growing unease. The bullets had passed clean through, but the entry wounds looked scorched, as if the bullets had been white-hot. The spent shell casings burned his fingers when he picked them up, turned black as if exposed to intense heat. The horse's tracks were pressed deeper into the hard earth than they should be, and each hoofprint was surrounded by a faint scorch mark, as if the ground itself had burned. Over the next days, Blackwell learned more. The Taggart gang was found 2 days later in a canyon 30 miles south. All 7 remaining members dead with the same scorched wounds. Their campfire still burned with black flames that gave off no heat. Reports came from other towns. In Sweetwater, a wanted murderer named Thomas Crane was found dead in his locked hotel room, shot twice through the heart. In Abilene, claim jumper Marcus Vale died in a shootout with a colored man in black. Witnesses swearing the stranger's bullet struck before Vale's gun cleared leather. Every victim was a wanted criminal who'd escaped justice. Every scene bore the same marks: scorched wounds, overheated casings, burned hoofprints. As word spread, people remembered old stories about a figure that appeared throughout history when justice failed, a dark rider who came for the wicked, who served a law older than any court. Ezekiel Washington, an elderly former slave, told Blackwell about the Midnight Rider. His grandmother claimed he was a colored man wronged so terribly that even death wouldn't take him. He'd made a bargain to hunt evil men forever as long as he could ride and his guns had bullets. Some called him an angel of vengeance. Others said he was something that just wore the shape of a man. A preacher named Josiah Crane claimed he'd seen the Black Cowboy in Kansas in 1869 after road agents murdered a family's son. The law wouldn't act because the killers were connected to powerful men. Then one night they heard horses and saw him riding toward the outlaw camp. By morning, all 5 murderers were dead, with bullets through their hearts. Even the Comanche had stories. A scout named Running Deer spoke of the shadow that rides, a spirit warrior who appeared when the balance between justice and evil tipped too far. They'd seen him killing soldiers who massacred women and children, hunting white men who murdered peaceful Comanche for scalps. He was not alive, but not dead, something in between that served the old justice. Blackwell tracked the reports obsessively, mapping them in his office. The pattern was clear. The Black Cowboy moved through Texas like cleansing fire, appearing wherever injustice had taken root. In October, corrupt Judge Silas Whitmore was found dead in Fort Worth. He'd taken bribes for years, letting murderers walk free. A stable hand reported seeing a colored man in black watching the judge's house the night before. In November, the entire Brazos River Land Company board died when their stagecoach ran off a cliff. They'd been forcing farmers off land through intimidation and murder. Witnesses saw a lone rider in black pacing the stagecoach before the accident. In December, slave hunter Caleb Root was found hanged outside Austin. Root had continued hunting free colored people after the war, selling them to illegal operations. The rope had burned through the branch and his body was scorched, though there was no fire. With each incident, the legend grew. People left offerings at crossroads. Others painted protective symbols on their doors. Churches included prayers about the Dark Rider, though some preachers argued he was doing God's work. Marshal Blackwell finally met the Black Cowboy face to face on a cold January night in 1878. He'd been investigating attacks on a settlement of freed slaves. Night riders in hoods had burned crops, killed livestock, and beaten people. Blackwell suspected Clayton Stone Jr. and his gang, but the boy's powerful father protected him. Riding back from the settlement, Blackwell saw a strange glow pulsing like a bruise in the darkness. He found the Black Cowboy standing in a clearing, his back turned. The black horse grazed nearby, eyes reflecting purple-black light. Around the clearing's edge lay 13 bodies in a perfect circle, Clayton Stone Jr. and his gang, all dead with scorched wounds. Blackwell said he could arrest him. The stranger turned and said no, he couldn't. In the silence that followed, Blackwell heard impossible things, whispers, screams, the crack of whips and rattle of chains. The cries of people torn from homes, families split on auction blocks, children sobbing for lost parents. The sound of rope stretching, bodies hitting dirt, guns firing into innocent crowds. All the terrible injustices that had soaked this land in blood. The stranger said he was the debt collector. What comes when laws fail, when courts turn blind eyes, when power protects the guilty and crushes the innocent? He was the answer to every prayer for justice that heaven ignored. The price that evil pays when it thinks it's gotten away clean. Blackwell asked if he was the devil. The stranger smiled and said the devil makes bargains. He just collected what was owed. When asked how long he'd been doing this, the stranger said long enough to forget how to die, long enough to become what he hunted, long enough to see empires rise and fall while the evil never changed, just wore new faces. Blackwell asked what happened now. The stranger told him to forget what he'd seen, write it up as gang violence, tell the settlement they were safe. And when evil walked free in his town, remember there was still justice in the world, even if it wore a frightening face. Blackwell asked for his name. The stranger looked back and something flickered across that ageless face. Sorrow, regret, or nothing at all. He said he didn't remember. It had been so long since he knew who he was before. He just remembered what they did, the injustice, the pain, the rage. And he remembered choosing to never let it happen again. No matter the cost. Names didn't matter anymore, just the work. Then he rode into darkness, and the purple-black light faded with him. Blackwell never spoke of that night while sober, but he changed. He became more aggressive, pursuing criminals, less tolerant of injustice, less willing to let powerful men shield their guilty sons. He'd found certainty that justice existed beyond human law, that evil never escaped unpunished. Reports of the Black Cowboy continued for years. In 1880, New Mexico Territory, hunting those who massacred a peaceful Apache camp. In 1883, Wyoming, where vigilantes lynched a Chinese laborer. In 1887, Oklahoma Territory, leaving dead land grabbers who'd driven native families from their allotments. Each appearance followed the same pattern. Criminals escaping justice found dead with scorched wounds. Witnesses describing a colored man in black on a black horse. Hoofprints that burned the ground. That sense of ancient righteousness, of scales balanced by merciless hands. But sightings grew less frequent as the century turned. Some said the Black Cowboy had finally found peace. Others claimed he still rode the empty places where injustice festered, waiting for darkness to do his terrible work. In 1923, historian Dr. Eleanor Vance researched African-American cowboys and became fascinated by the legend. She collected accounts, interviewed aging witnesses, tried to trace the Black Cowboy's origins. What she found was disturbing. The earliest confirmed sighting was from 1847, 30 years before Bitter Creek, when a colored man in black reportedly killed 3 slave catchers in Missouri. But there were earlier stories. A Revolutionary War veteran claimed seeing a dark rider killing British soldiers who'd burned a colored settlement in 1781. A Spanish missionary's 1720 journal mentioned a Negro phantasma who appeared during full moons to punish those abusing enslaved people. Dr. Vance searched for a real person who inspired the legend. She found dozens of candidates, escaped slaves turned outlaws, freedmen working as lawmen, cowboys with reputations as skilled gunfighters, but none fit. None could account for sightings separated by decades or centuries. None explained the consistency, always the same clothes, the same ageless face, those ancient, sorrow-filled eyes. Her 1925 book, The Black Cowboy, Legend and Reality on the American Frontier, was dismissed by academics as folklore, but it reached people who knew better, descendants of slaves, Native Americans, old cowboys. They wrote with their own stories, their own evidence that the legend was more than legend. Dr. Vance's final letter before her 1942 death said she'd spent 20 years trying to prove the Black Cowboy was a myth. Now she believed something else. She believed he was real, always had been, and always would be as long as injustice walked the earth. Perhaps that was terrifying, or perhaps it was the only hope any of them had. The legend didn't die with the Old West. Reports continued, adapted to new times and injustices. In 1955, during the Civil Rights Movement, witnesses in Mississippi reported seeing a man matching the Black Cowboy's description near where Emmett Till's body was found. 2 men involved in that murder died in unusual accidents within a year, one in a mysterious fire, another when his truck inexplicably ran off a bridge. In 1968, the night after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, a Memphis motel clerk saw a lone figure in black standing across from the Lorraine Motel for hours, perfectly still. When police approached, he vanished. Not ran, the clerk insisted, but vanished like smoke. In the 1990s, a white supremacist compound in Idaho burned down. Investigators found evidence of accelerant but couldn't explain scorch marks, forming hoofprints leading to and from the site. A rancher claimed he'd seen a rider in black on a black horse that night. Even in the 21st century, stories persist. A corrupt sheriff known for targeting black motorists found dead in his patrol car from old-fashioned gunshot wounds. The bullets were .45 caliber Colt rounds, not standard issue for over a century. Security cameras caught a strange figure on horseback nearby, though the footage was too degraded to see clearly. The truth about the Black Cowboy remains elusive. Skeptics dismiss him as urban legend, a folk hero created to provide hope against systemic injustice. They point out the impossibility of one man living for centuries, the supernatural elements that mark these as tall tales. The way the story changes to fit whatever social context needs a dark angel of vengeance. But believers know better. They know some evils are so profound, some injustices so terrible, they leave scars on reality itself. They know sometimes the universe demands balance, and when human systems fail to provide it, something else steps in, something older, something that remembers every wrong and exacts payment for every debt. They know that on dark nights, in places where injustice has soaked into the soil, you can still hear hoofbeats that shouldn't be there. They know men who commit terrible crimes sometimes die in ways that can't be explained. They know there's a figure in black who rides the lonely places, waiting, watching, collecting what's owed. And they know if you find yourself alone at midnight at some desolate crossroads, if you hear those hoofbeats growing closer, you'd better hope your conscience is clear, because the Black Cowboy doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't show mercy. He doesn't forget. He just collects the debts, and the price is always the same. Justice in blood, in fire, in darkness, forever. Old-timers in places like Bitter Creek will tell you one final thing about the Black Cowboy. Seeing him is an omen. If you glimpse that dark rider on his darker horse, it means one of two things. Either justice is about to be served, or you're about to become its instrument. Because the Black Cowboy doesn't just punish the guilty. Sometimes he marks the righteous. Sometimes he appears to people at their own crossroads, facing choices between right and wrong, justice and expedience, courage and fear. In those moments, he serves as a reminder of what happens when good people do nothing, when systems fail, when evil goes unchallenged. He is the consequence, the reckoning, the balance sheet of history written in powder smoke and paid in blood. And whether you believe in him or not, whether you think he's real or just a story told to frighten children and comfort the oppressed, one thing remains certain. Somewhere, in some dark corner of the world, injustice is being done. Someone is being hurt. Someone is crying out for justice that won't come. And somewhere else, a rider in black is mounting a horse as dark as midnight, checking his guns and beginning another ride that will never truly end. The Black Cowboy, the debt collector, the legend that refuses to die because the evil he hunts refuses to die either. Ride on, Dark Rider, ride on.